Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to That Man Show. My name is Curtis Brooks. I am your host, executive coach, and men's life coach specializing in transformational leadership for men. Guys, we got yet another powerful show for you. I'm super excited because this is yet another show that is true and dear to my heart here because during the show I will be sharing some of my own experiences. So it is interesting that this show here, actually, this just kind of was impressed to share this information with you. And so in this show, we'll be talking about mama's pain, how sons can recover from identity theft. And I will be sharing some of my own personal stories with you as well as I have succumbed to certain things, and I will be sharing it with you. So that being said, before we get started, I want to let you know that you can contact us, or at least be a part of the live stream here through our Zoom link. I'm going to put that link on Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, let's see here. If you are on LinkedIn, let me see here. So pardon the commotion here, seemingly chaos. It is kind of ordered to a degree, but okay, cool. All right, so what I'm doing right now is getting the links ready. So just to make sure that the links are set up right, and so give me 1 second here. I will be getting started, and just to let you know that this is a one-man show, and that is sometimes a challenge with a one-man show. You're having to do all of the production. So that's just kind of how it goes. But nevertheless, give me just a second here. I want to share the link on Facebook and Facebook and LinkedIn. I guess I probably should share it on LinkedIn, YouTube as well. So I am here. Bear with me 1 second here. So if you are joining me on LinkedIn, let's see here. Facebook and YouTube. There we go. All right. So if you are joining me on LinkedIn, here is going to be the link. We'll share that with you in just 1 second here. So I've got a couple of things going on here, but I do promise you a great conversation here, guys. And so just bear with me here. Hey, Tracy, thank you for joining over on LinkedIn. So I'm going to share the Zoom link here on LinkedIn. So if you are so inclined to be a part of the conversation here in Zoom, you are more than welcome to. That's going to actually put you front and center on screen here, just as I am on screen, just talking to you all by my lonesome. But nevertheless, if you are so inclined to join me on LinkedIn, or join me through the Zoom link, that's going to put you front and center on making you part of the broadcast with me. And I'd love to have you on there if you are so inclined to join once we get started. So give me just a second here. I got one more link to place over on Facebook. So I do apologize, guys. It's just sometimes not an easy way to do this, or at least, 1 second here. But we're going to get started in just a second here. We got some great content. I hope that you guys are having a fabulous day, because here in the Houston area, the weather's been great, absolutely awesome. So yeah, this is a monster sometimes when you're doing a one-man show. Hey, Apostle over on Facebook, thank you for joining. We're going to get started in just 1 second. So I'm going to put the Zoom link there. So again, if you are either on Facebook, so inclined to join me on Zoom, you can do that via the Zoom link that I've just shared with you on Facebook. Also share that link on LinkedIn as well. So let me just make it available on YouTube really quick here, guys. Bear with me here. I promise you we're going to get started here in just a second here. I just kind of want to make it available on Channel. Mm, okay, so, all right. All right, there you go, guys. We've got the link over on YouTube. We've got the link over on Facebook. So once again, if you are so inclined to join on either one of the platforms, that's LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, you are absolutely more than welcome. And as I stated earlier, that's going to make you or place you front and center here and make you part of the conversation that we're having here on all three platforms. That's LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So once more, as I stated earlier, my name is Curtis Brooks. I am a executive coach for men and men's life coach, specializing in transformational leadership for men. And today we are talking about mom's pain. We're talking about mom's pain, how sons can recover from identity theft. And this is a very interesting conversation that we're going to be having. And I'm going to be just be front and center, get downright personal with you guys, because sometimes that's what it takes. And a lot of times when we're having these conversations, in order for people to really kind of get the power that we are, and in which we're sharing our wisdom and our different truths, we need to be front, right, center, authentic about what we're talking about, what we're sharing. And so that's what you're going to get in this conversation. So thank you, Henry, for joining. Henry, long time no see, man. Thank you for joining. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you. Greetings from DC. Thank you, sir. And again, Tracy and Apostle over on Facebook. Thank you all for joining. We're talking about mama's pain. And one of the things, or at least the questions I posed initially on Facebook and LinkedIn, that question was, 1 second here. The question was, it was for men. It says, men, what is the one thing that you believe that you didn't receive from your mother that you may be still struggling with? And it was a question I thought about just to kind of get some of us, for men who are be watching the broadcast. It was a question that I wanted to put out there. And again, just to kind of provoke thought, because oftentimes we are, as men, as young boys, we're dealing with challenges. We're dealing with identity, and that's a major thing for us. And it's a major thing for women as well, but we are talking about men. So that being the case, we're talking about mom's pain. And so as men, we are dealing with the identity. Obviously, the bulk of our identity comes from our father. But there's something about when a mother is going through pain, and perhaps the pain is coming from the father. In most cases, the pain does come from the father, what he's not either given to her, or how he may show up, or the lack thereof, and how he shows up. There is a pain oftentimes that a mother goes through. And only God knows what all the things that a woman, a mother may go through, and dealing with the father. The different things that she might be going through might be just too numerous to name or to number, but she is going through something. So I want to read this to you really quick here, and it's part of my notes here as I was preparing. And so we're going to be coming out of the book of, we're going to be coming out of the Bible, and I'll just reading you some a couple of verses here. And so we're going to be talking about Jabez. Name is pronounced a couple of different ways, but this is an individual who was born during a time where the times were rough, and perhaps maybe the times that we're in right now. This young man or old man, doesn't give how old he is, but he was born in a time where it was just a rough period, and his mother named him Jabez. His mother had given him that name, and the name means born in sorrow. So the mother was absolutely dealing with something. To name your child, to give your child such a name that identifies pain born in sorrow. So it says in my notes here, Jabez's mother named him Jabez, and it means born in sorrow. Yet he refused to let her pain define his destiny. Through vulnerability, faith, and intentional healing, he rewrote his story. So can you. So can we as other men who are dealing with certain things as it relates to pain that comes from their mother. And it's not to imply that fathers don't hurt sons, because they do. Absolutely. People hurt people, and that's just a part of life. And I don't think any of us can escape that. People hurt people. Yes, absolutely. On Facebook, Apostle, born in sorrow. It says, so whether you struggle with self-doubt, for us men, for whether you're struggling with self-doubt, people-pleasing, or feeling unworthy of your calling, in this episode, we offer a roadmap that's going to shed the inherited shame that we as men often deal with. And it's going to lead us out of a place, or at least from a place called the wilderness, into a place of clarity. So that is the goal of this conversation, is for me to share my insights, share my thoughts, and hopefully, or the goal is to lead men out of the wilderness as it relates to that area, because we can absolutely be in many, many different wilderness and different parts of our life, not necessarily having to do with the pain that comes from a mother. But in fact, in this story here, I want to read it to you really quick. It's just a couple of verses here. So this is First Chronicles chapter verse 4. First Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9 and 10. And Jabez was more honorable than his brethren. His mother called his name Jabez, saying, because I bear him in with sorrow. Okay, last scripture. Verse 10, and Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my coast, and that thine hand might be with me, and that thou wouldest keep me from evil, that it may not grieve me. And God granted him that which he requested. So during this conversation here, we're going to close the gap on some of the things, that the pain that we as men have been under, and to myself included. And it is not about blaming our mothers. It is not about shaming anyone for the pain that I have dealt with, or for the pain that other men may have dealt with who are listening to this broadcast, and who will listen to this replay. This pain is something that we have to get through. It's something that we have to overcome, because when we don't overcome this pain that we as men are dealing with, or have dealt with by way of our mothers, and again, it is not to bash women. Many of you who have listened to my conversations or listened to me do different discussions. Hopefully, you know that it's not my heart. It is not to bash women. It's not to bash men. I'm not pandering to men. I'm not pandering to women. Ideally, I come from a place of just being authentic and just telling it like it is, and as trying to be unbiased as much as possible, in order to gather other people's opinions, because that's what we're talking about. I want to hear other people's opinions. Steve Fuller. I'm not sure. Steve Fuller. Hey, Steve, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Appreciate you. Give me 1 second here. I'll kind of go through a few things here. Let me see here. Hold on 1 second here. Placeholder. All right, give me 1 second, Steve. But so as men, we are dealing with a number of different things here. And the challenge is that let me, I kind of lost my train of thought. So as I said here, I just want to just clarify, many people who know me and have heard my discussions, this is not about bashing women. Absolutely not at all. And so we're not going to give you at least lay out anything that's going to bash women or men. Again, we're not pandering. I'm not pandering to men or women. I'm just being authentic in the way that I know how. And again, having this discussion because these discussions are absolutely important because reality of it is that mothers do hurt sons, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Mothers do hurt sons, and some years ago, I was talking with my wife, and I had said something unintentional as it may have been. I apologized, and she says, "Well, I know you apologize, but it still hurt." And one of the things I did not want her to do, for me, just how I kind of grew up, I did not want to see my wife hurt. And so I found myself apologizing profusely to alleviate her pain. But I had to recognize that what I said, or at least sit with it, and recognize and just be there for a moment and recognize that what I said hurt her. And I had to deal with the pain with that. And oftentimes, and I'm saying that because a lot of times as mothers, women, for us as men, when we're sharing our views and sharing our opinions and sharing our feelings on certain things, it becomes difficult for women to grasp those things, to take hold of those things. Probably much in the same way that I was explaining to my wife a few years back when I had said something to hurt her, unintentional as it may have been. I found myself trying to fix it, but then at the same time having a hard time accepting or at least sitting with what I had said to her, knowing that she was hurt. Though it was not my intentions to hurt her, that's exactly what she was dealing with, and I had to accept those feelings. So in this story, Jabez, he is in a situation, and we don't know exactly all of what's happening, but he's in a crisis. He doesn't blame his mother. But he does call on a God that could help him with the situation. So, one second here. Get my notes here. He called on the only one who could help him with the situation. So, throughout this conversation that we're having tonight, the goal of this conversation is for us as men, to take back that power. Take back that lack of understanding, because oftentimes we as men too, especially when we're younger, we don't understand a lot of times that our mothers, our fathers have gone through certain relations. They have had relationships too, much in many cases, some relationships similar to ours. Obviously not exactly, but the point I'm making is that our parents have had relationships too, or have gone through a series of different hurts. And so in this situation, here is Jabez, his mother, and doesn't even give her a name. And that's not necessarily important what her name is, but the fact is that this young man, was dealing with a situation. And in this situation, he called on God. So the psychology behind the sons being hurt, or what takes place when the sons are being hurt, is there is the psychological, the effects of it. And there are no psychological effects of the sons being hurt by their mothers, unintentional as it may have been, or again, most of it is depending on what the woman is dealing with. So the psychological effects that take place is the men become emasculated. That's one of the biggest ones. And personally, I dealt with that. From my mother. And I'm just going to be very honest with you. And again, this is not I've healed since then. Me and my mom have made, we're friends now, and we talked about certain things. And it was tough even getting to having those conversations with her, because my mother, probably not different from most women, other women, want to have that conversation. She didn't want to have the conversation. My stepfather, and again, this is just being very personal, my stepfather was loved my mother very, very much so, and he came from a very large family, and awesome provider. He took care of us as his own. But my mother, whatever she may have been dealing with, it showed up. It showed up in her emasculating him, and I was front and center watching this. And so, nevertheless, it was quite disturbing. As a young person, I didn't know what to do with all of that. Couldn't even begin to process it. But it wasn't until I became an adult that a lot of what I had heard, or the feelings that had come forth, I had begun to, as I become an adult, I then began processing those things. And as I was processing those things, guess what? They showed up in relationships. So the psychological effects of the pain that mothers go through, and in turn projecting that pain onto their sons, is real. It then shows up in their relationship. So it showed up in my relationship. Steve Fuller, are you there?
I am here.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully, let's see here. Can you say something again?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. We can hear you perfectly. I just want to make sure your audio was coming through. Okay, guys. I have Steve Fuller online here. He's joining me on Zoom here, and let's see here. And hopefully you can hear his audio. It does appear to be coming through. So if you can hear Steve, let us know. That would be awesome. So, Steve, what do you want to add to this, man? Thank you for joining, brother.
I'm just listening right now. Don't have any questions at this moment, but if I do, I will chime in.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, the psychological effects of the pain that comes from the mothers is the identity. It is the loss of identity, and that is major. And I think for most of us as men, people in general, but obviously this conversation now is geared towards men, but for most of us as men, when we are don't have an identity, and I get it, as I stated earlier, for us as men, our identity, a large percentage of our identity comes from our fathers. And as with the women, a large percentage of the identity that a woman has comes from her father as well. And so for us men, when we don't have an individual in our household, such as our father or a male role model to present us with that identity, and to just to continuously promote that identity and who we are as men, when we don't have a representative in a household, it becomes very difficult for us as sons to show up in a manner that represents our fathers, and again, what's been presented to us. And again, there's a lot of different scenarios even with that, but ideally, we're talking about when men are dealing with the pain that comes from their mothers. There is, as I mentioned, emasculation, and being emasculated, that in itself is major. It's not, I could just give you the definition. Let me give you the definition really quick here. The definition of the word emasculation, or being emasculated, make sure, so I'll give you the definition aside from what my own thoughts are. So it says to make a man feel less masculine. To make a man feel less masculine. And in today's climate especially, there are a lot of there are a lot of ways that this is done by women. And I'm even going to step out on a limb and say that there's just a lot of hurt. There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of us as fathers, we didn't know how to show up. And again, this is not about me pandering to women by any stretch of the imagination. But the reality of it is that if the fathers don't know how to show up, the mothers don't know how to show up. And just as I stated earlier, the daughters get their identity from the fathers. The sons get their identity from the father as well. And so here in the story that I just read to you, Jabez, First Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9 and 10, the scriptures that I just read to you, here was a young man who was dealing with a situation. His mother had named him Jabez, and the name means born in sorrow. So I think this is a clear indication that the mother was going through something. The mother was in a battle or had been consistently fighting a battle. There's a whole lot of stuff that's being left out. But for a woman to name her child born in sorrow is indicative of that she was going through something. So we can infer a lot of different things. But the reality of it is that we do know that for an individual who's not in pain, they're not going to name their child Jabez, meaning born in sorrow. It's not going to happen that way. The identity theft comes in the way of us as men being, as a word I used earlier, being emasculated. That's a big word with a lot going on in it, a lot to it. Because ultimately, for us as men, we end up sabotaging ourselves because of the low self-esteem that comes with being emasculated. It's a loss of identity. It's a loss of an image of what that father looks like or what that father represents. Because rest assured, if the mother believes that the father is crap. I want to say some other words, but if the mother believes that the father is crap, that persona spills off over into her son as she relates to her son. And there have been many people, many women, or just people in general, been trying to disprove that. But you can't disprove that. Because at some point, it's hard to hide the anger. It becomes difficult to hide the anger that comes with the dissatisfaction that Jabez's mother was dealing with, or the dissatisfaction that our mothers may have been dealing with. It becomes very difficult to hide that anger or hide that disappointment. So for us as men, we end up sabotaging ourselves. We end up dealing with the chronic guilt of not being able to please our mothers. Because rest assured, when mom's critical, because when the mother is dealing with certain different things, it makes her critical. If she's got issues with the father, she then becomes very critical. And at times appearing not as direct or being, not as direct, but indirectly as she's dealing with the son. But again, it's only so long that a person can hold that mask up. I want to check out this comment here before I go on here, because I have a tendency to just kind of sometimes be oblivious to the comments by accident here. So Tracy over on LinkedIn says, she says, a tough father fosters a dutiful son, but a overly benevolent mother makes a waste makes a waste. I believe that's what she's saying over there. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I think that that's hugely important, Tracy, because there men need confirmation. Men need confirmation for mothers, and when the confirmation does not come from mothers, when she's not confirming the son for who he is, and again, she's confirming the son for who he is by way of how she sees the father. I believe that God has absolutely perfectly laid things out for us in a just most amazing way, and I think all along it was a simple plan, but somehow our feelings got in the way, our emotions got in the way, and it gave the impression that God was lying. And even with within the chapter 3, the book of Genesis chapter 3, after Eve had been deceived, and she at some point said that she perceived, so it was something that she was looking at, and so through that perception her feelings were attached to it. So her perception gave way, or her feelings gave way to her perceptions. So oftentimes, because of that, she now seen God as not being truthful or dishonest, and just not being who he is. And so from that space, much like we're discussing here, from that space, here was a woman that was dealing with the pain, of the father. And again, there's a lot that can be inferred from this from the scriptures I read to you earlier. There's a ton of different things. She could have had previous relationships and just one relationship after the other, picking the wrong men. I don't know. It doesn't give us that information. But what I do know, that from the pain that she was dealing with, she obviously put her son in a situation. She obviously created the environment for him by naming him Jabez, born in sorrow. That's what the name means. So as I started to share with you my own story and my only testimony, my testimony as well, that I have overcome, is that I was that person, that young man who was emasculated. And again, I don't blame my mother for it, but I had to place this conversation before her. And for us as men, that's what we're going to have to do. Maybe your mother's not there, but somehow you've got to come to grips with it. And even by talking with another man, such as myself, as I mentioned earlier, I'm an executive coach and men's life coach, specializing in transformational leadership for men. So connect with me in this area if that's something that you're dealing with. Because the reality of it is that if you're not dealing with it, men, it's going to show up in your relationships. Everything you touch is going to show up. Because this is how deep the scars that come from being emasculated can be. They can affect everything that we touch. And we can say, oh, I didn't mean to, such as I shared with you earlier. We can say, I didn't mean to. But the reality of it is that whether you meant to or you didn't mean to, the result is that you said what you said or you did what you did. And this is how our stuff as men shows up in our relationships. Anything that we are connected with. It keeps us from growing, I should say. It keeps us as sons becoming fathers. And I did a conversation last week And I want to clarify the father and the son piece. For the son is a son, a person who is, when I say son, it's not necessarily an individual who is, 3 years old or 10 years old. A son can be a person who lacks certain knowledge, like a person who is a student perhaps, but a son in the sense that he lacks a level of maturity. And the father, just so that we're clear on that, the father, Jay says over on LinkedIn that Jabez could have had a disability. Absolutely. Again, there's a lot that can be inferred from that story, for sure. Absolutely. And so the father, just kind of, again, giving some clarity on the father is the son who eventually grows up and comes to a level of maturity that he has essentially healed. He's no longer being moved by the past experiences, no longer to the degree that it's inhibiting him from having the right relationships with his family, with his spouse, with his wife. And again, even as a father, doesn't necessarily mean that the man is married. I'm speaking of a level of spiritual maturity as a father, and also as a son, a level of maturity which the son and the father, they're the same but different through maturity. The son doesn't know what the father knows because he's not quite there yet, and the father has come to a place where he's walking in wisdom, walking in understanding. And he's taking care of his family. He's addressing his wife. He's addressing his children in a proper way. And so I just wanted to clarify that. So it is important to understand that when we as sons are dealing with the pain of our mothers, perhaps being emasculated, because rest assured, this battle between men and women has been going on well before you and I were even thought about. Well before you and I were thought about. And because the battle still goes on, we as men have to take the high road. And I say men, the fathers, have to learn how to take the high road, because the sons, in most cases, are still in the low places, saying, why do I have to take the high road? She did this. He said this. That's what sons do. But fathers who are healed, they grow from their experiences. So consequently, as sons who are dealing with the chronic guilt, they're also dealing with a host of other emotional issues. I wrote in my notes, they oftentimes will compete with other men. That's one of the things that come with that emasculation, especially being emasculated by our mothers. And I know we can say our mothers, but in turn, it ends up being, in most cases, being women. And I'll tell you one thing that has, again, from my own personal experience, is that when men have been emasculated, guess what we end up doing? Unintentional as it may be, we end up connecting with other women who have done the same thing that our mothers have done. That was me in the past. Entered into relationships with other women who've done the same thing. Because as I mentioned earlier, it ends up being an identity issue or situation that we're having. And when we don't know who we are as men, coming from a place where, as I mentioned earlier, from sons who fathers, and when I say fathers, just to kind of explain this again to you really quick, when I say fathers, it doesn't mean that you have children. I'm speaking of a level of spiritual maturity. So there are hosts of other emotional limits that men that show up in men or show up in the sons who will enter into relationships. We've got mama boys that shows up. Just another personal story. I in a past relationship, I was with the mother of my son and my oldest son, and we had just started dating. We later on got married, but we had just got started dating, and me and my mother were very close, super close, and she said something to me, and she was aware of how close I was to my mother, and so she said to me, she goes, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And we were going through something. I can't remember, some kind of disagreement or we were going through. So she says to me, "What are you going to do? You going to call your mother?" And and I tell you, man, that absolutely crushed me. That crushed me when she said that, and it had did something to me in a way where I just remember I was in a zone for for a good period of time, and I can laugh about it now, but at the time that was a crushing place, man. And I would say at times, later on, even working with clients, I would say, there's nothing like it's nothing like for a woman to say something, even our wives or girlfriends or significant others, to say something that will crush us as men. Yeah, absolutely, Apostle. Yeah, absolutely. Over on Facebook, thank you. But yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of things that had taken place when she said that. I wanted to fight against it. I wanted to, say, "You're a liar. That's not true. That's not true. That's not true." But it was true. I wanted to call my mother, but it was at that time, and I'll be very, very honest with you. I was in my early 30s. I probably, let me see, probably around 32, 31 or 32. I'm well beyond that in years now, but I was maybe 31 or 32. And it was at that time I found myself, wait a minute, I've got to get this together, because I can't continue in a way where I'm a son for my mother and can't be there for my wife. So I had to grow up quickly. And behind that conversation, yeah, absolutely, Apostle. Triggers got triggered over on Facebook. Absolutely. So behind that conversation, I was quiet for weeks. I believe weeks. Yeah, you know what? To be honest, if I'm just be honest, I gave her the silent treatment. That's part of that being emasculated. That's what comes with it. Us men don't respond emotionally when we have been emasculated by the mothers, by our mothers. And let me say this. It wasn't necessarily that my mother was doing it directly to me. It was the damage of what I seen my father go through, the conversations, the different things that she would say, that she had said. And even to dive into this deeper, as much as those conversations hurt me, and I was dealing with that, as I mentioned earlier, as my son's mother, my wife at the time, had said to me, here I was not fully have dealt with that. I had not dealt with that whole piece of being emasculated, because that's when it really came up. So consequently, a part of that being emasculated, again, as I mentioned earlier, those limited emotions that us sons are dealing with. That was the silent treatment that I had given her for days, or it was probably weeks. And it got to a point where I didn't even call my mother. My mother had been calling me for probably months. I wasn't returning a phone call. Not because I was mad with my mother, but because I had to grow up. I had to grow up. And growing up, I want to take a look at a comment over on LinkedIn. So I am over on LinkedIn. So if I'm looking away from the screen, I'm looking at my other monitor and wanting to read the comments here. Okay. Jay said earlier, scholars believe that Jabez was had a disability. Absolutely. And so Jay over on LinkedIn says, family trauma can be passed down. We've heard the phrases "sins of the father." Absolutely, Jay. The sins of the father absolutely can be passed down to to the children, and to even dive further into those sins, and not necessarily that something is so wrong, but when fathers don't know how to communicate, that doesn't mean that it's a sin, but the behavior patterns and I'll just kind of toss that in there, the behavioral patterns that the fathers have had that are carried on to the sons, and eventually carried on also to the daughters. So if the fathers, even if the father is absent, and I don't want to make it seem like I just place it all on the mothers, but to just emphasize the pain that comes from. Yeah, Apostle says, so true, generational effects. Absolutely, Apostle over on Facebook. So yeah, I don't want to place, make it seem like I'm building something, building a case against women. That's not the purpose of this, the point of this. But there is a hurt that comes from a mother that is difficult to sew up. That's difficult to heal from for us as men, that if we have not healed from those scars, that pain that comes from our mother. And again, as I said earlier, we have to remember that our mothers also have had previous relationships. They have been hurt from previous relationships too. And perhaps that was the case with Jabez. I don't know. Even if he did have a disability, I don't know. This is what Jay was saying, that scholars were saying that he may have had a disability. But she also was going through something. And I think I believe that's evident that she was going through something. It doesn't say exactly what she was going through, but she was dealing with something. And so, because fathers have poor communication styles, and here's the thing, this is a cycle. In most cases, they've learned it from their fathers. And consequently, it shows up on how they relate to their family. It's not just about maybe his wife, but even just on a broader spectrum, how the man relates to his entire family. If he shuts down on a conversation related to what his wife may have said, or his girlfriend, or his significant other, he shuts out the entire family. And so guess what happens? Us men, we begin to relate to our children in the same fashion that our fathers related to us. And perhaps there can be many of you who will say, no, that's not true. But the reality of it is that this, in most cases, is the only template that we have. This is the only design that we have. And it's what we're going to give out. This is just a fact. And even to just dive into further on a personal note, I've had a relationship many years ago now where is that? And I would even say, I would even venture to say that because my mother dealt with my father in the same way, or and emasculated him essentially through verbal abuse. Guess what happened to me? And many of you don't know this about me, but I'll be direct and honest with you. I end up being that person who was hurting my girlfriend at the time. Many years later, I'm since married and have a loving wife and family. I'm healed. God gets all the glory. But I ended up being that person. So as much as I was pained through what my mother was doing to my father, it was the template that I was given. It's what I was given. And before an individual, I believe, before an individual can say that, oh no, that's so awful, I would never do that. But in most cases, this is the route that you will have to come. You will have to come through the route. You will have to go through that same traffic that you experience. And so here's what happens. Many of us as men, we can find ourselves hiding behind the pain. Hiding behind the pain. Wanting to avoid the traffic that we've got to enter in at some point, called life, called relationships. Having to avoid, hey Lisa, thank you for joining over on LinkedIn. Wanting to avoid the pain that we may have seen our fathers go through, or the pain that was, the burden that was placed upon us. And so we can find ourselves as men shrinking back or shrinking down to fit in, to avoid the discomfort that comes with relationships. We can find ourselves as men not showing up in our authentic voice. We can find ourselves as men not showing up and taking upon our proper role. Yes, I said proper role. Men can't be women, women can't be men. That's just the way it is. I'm sure I can have a lot of people can challenge me on that one, but that's just my belief. A man can't be a woman, a woman can't be a man, and that's just the way it is. But the result is that as men, we will find ourselves shrinking back, trying to make ourselves fit in, trying to make ourselves fit into that relationship. Perhaps the relationship is not the right relationship for you as a man. Or you found yourself in a multitude of different relationships, one after the other. That means that's healing that needs to take place. Or if you find yourself as a man angry with women. Women are this, women are this, women are that. There's healing that needs to take place. So rather than deal with the emotions that come with the healing, we as men sometimes will continue to shrink back and deal with the stunted growth that prevents us from becoming fathers, remaining in that space of being a son. And unfortunately, it is, I think we just do an injustice as men to not only to our families, but to society, to our communities, when we don't heal. Because what happens, the men who have been emasculated, they can potentially, or at times they're potentially effeminate men who don't know how to deal with their emotions. And because they don't know how to deal with their emotions, and yes, it is said that women are commonly, just innately, they're more emotional. It does not mean they cannot be logical. That's not what I'm saying. But because women are geared or wired physiologically to be more emotional than, or psychologically to be more emotional than men, when a son is born under the guise of his mother and the pain that she has dealt with in life through maybe a gamut of different relationships. Perhaps love didn't work out for her in the way that she had hoped for through a different relationships, or maybe one relationship. The likelihood of her taking that pain out on her son or her children is highly likely. And so, because the young son or the son does not have a representative in his household to deal with his emotions, or to learn how to deal with his emotions, or at least being able to pull out the logical side of himself, he ends up responding emotionally, as in the way that his mother responds, because she's a woman. And again, this just ideally, just innately, women are more emotional. And so the man becomes more emotional as well. And what we call effeminate men, more emotional, nagging and just, oh, this is this and this and this. And I mean, it happens. It happens. But men don't do that. And healing needs to take place at some point. Healing has to take place in those areas. And when they don't take place in those areas, again, the man or the son is emotional. He can have 3 kids. He can have 4 kids. He can have college degrees, be a leader of a large company. But until the son deals with the mother issues, he'll always remain the son. And he'll always find himself, I wouldn't always, and I can't definitively say, but he can find himself from one situation to another situation to another situation, and just not being able to think clearly, to think things out clearly. Because in most cases, that son cannot, it's difficult for him to connect with his logical side of himself. So there's a power that a woman has over a man, that she has the ability to speak life into him. Much like the son, much like a father. Obviously, a father can speak life into his son. But again, through a myriad of different things that may have taken place, as I mentioned earlier in the story of Jabez I read to you, there's a lot of things that can be inferred that had taken place in that story. But one thing that we do know for sure is that she named her son Jabez, and the name Jabez means born in sorrow. And at some point, Jabez cried out to the God of heaven, asking for help. He didn't blame his mother. Thank you. Hey, Annie, thank you for joining us over on LinkedIn. I'm going to read this comment here. I'm looking away from my screen here. Over on LinkedIn, Annie says, agree with you, Curtis. You speak truth that many of this is in our sons. It comes from our sons, their relations with their mothers. Absolutely, absolutely, Annie. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it is not, as I said earlier, this conversation is not to blame women, not to blame men, but at some point, there's some point. There's a model, I believe, that God has laid out for us, and And perhaps this conversation about God even frightens you. You don't want to hear that, but I just don't believe that we've been placed in earth to not have a plan. And even if that plan does not come from our own household, even if we don't have the representation in our household. For myself, as I've been sharing with you some of my journey, I've had to look to other fathers. I've had to read other stories. And I've had to continue searching for the help that I needed because I didn't have a template. I had some kind of template, but it wasn't a template that was going to be beneficial to having healthy relationships. And at some point as a man, I had to recognize that this wasn't healthy because in most cases, for me, I married my mother. Obviously, I didn't marry my mother, but the woman who I married was like my mother. And that in itself came with disappointment in a previous relationship or a marriage, I should say. That in itself came with a lot of pain. And as I said earlier, it becomes very difficult for us as men or just people in general, if all you know is all you know, it becomes very difficult to do something different in what you know. And I don't think there's any way to escape that. Meaning that you're going to have to deal with the feelings that come from it. Because that is what we know, we're more apt to lean in that direction. Even when the good things have been given to us, even when love shows up, even when the right person shows up. In most cases, before we can establish they are the right person for us, we're actually leaning this way or this way. We're leaning away from the thing that's been presented to us. We're more positioned to give them We're more positioned to give to our mate, our spouse, our significant other. We're more in a position to give them more of what we've dealt with. More of the verbal abuse or the emasculation that we dealt with from our mothers as sons. The pain that we dealt with. So before we can find love, before we can find peace, perhaps you're not looking for love. But I've already shared with you earlier that in most cases, because men have not healed or choose not to deal with the feelings that come with the process of healing, they can find themselves shrinking back and finding themselves trying to show up strong and mighty and big in other areas, perhaps as a leader on their job. They show up and knowledgeable and got it all together in certain areas of their life, maybe on their job. But deep down, they can find themselves sworn to secrecy of what they've dealt with, not being able to release the pain, the feelings that come from that. So rather than show up, much like Jabez had showed up, whether he had a disability or not, at some point, Jabez had to call on someone who was greater than himself. Jabez had to ask for help at some point. That's what he did. He asked for help. Again, his situation could have been a lot of different things going on here. But at some point, it says, and Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, "Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my coast." He didn't even blame his mother. He didn't blame his mother. Maybe he had gone through those things already. I don't know. The scripture doesn't say that. But at some point, he had to acknowledge. He didn't have to, but he made a decision to acknowledge that he was hurt. He knew in a big way that his mother couldn't do anything for him in that space. And I can remember just a quick story here. I'm going to read Annie's comments here over on LinkedIn. Thank you, Annie, for responding here with your engagement here. And he says over on LinkedIn, he says, sadly, the more son tries to be a self-sufficient man, the more the mothers overcompensate to make things worse. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I that's a powerful statement there, Annie, because again, unintentionally as it may be for the mothers, what happens is that you end up taking the son's you end up taking his autonomy away. And he says he becomes less self-sufficient, and he says over on LinkedIn. And that is the absolute truth. And I think there's a major clear difference in how we as fathers raise sons. There's a big difference in how we as fathers raise sons. Because as fathers, we know what's out there. We know that this world is not going to be fair to our sons. We know that this world is going to eat our sons up and chew them up and spit them out. But if the fathers can't take their rightful place through the pain they may have experienced through their fathers, through their mothers, if the sons who become hopefully fathers at some time in life, they become fathers. And as I mentioned earlier, the sons can be 40 years old. The son can be 50 years old. The son can be 60 years old. We're talking about maturity, a level of spiritual maturity. These are just certain truths. Yes, you can absolutely, each of us can raise our sons and, our sons differently. But there are some things that are just absolutely the truth. And we can't keep shunning the truth. We can't keep shunning the truth, man. And that's just the reality. That when we as sons don't show up in the right way because of the pain that comes from our mothers, we are forever sons. It makes it difficult for us to show up as fathers and husbands. It makes it difficult. The father comes first, well before the husband. The father and the husband are different now. That's just my opinion. The father and the husband are different. The father comes from a space of the father, and I'm just going to put it out there. The father comes from a space of more like God, a Godhead figure in his household. So it's different. Father and husband is different. And he says, I get it, Curtis. You are a brave man to talk about this This reality, absolutely, man. It does take courage to have these conversations, man. And it absolutely does take courage to have these conversations, man, because the reality of it is that we as men, a lot of men are hurting, and because of the pain here that we have not healed from the pain that comes from our mothers, it makes it very difficult for us to show up in our rightful places in our new relationships or rightful relationships, or it makes it difficult for us to show up as husbands. It makes it difficult to show up as fathers in different relationships, because we can find ourselves again lacking the knowledge, lacking the experience, because in order to get the knowledge, rest assured you're going to be roughed up in order to get this knowledge. This knowledge is not free. It is not free. It costs you a lot of pain to get this knowledge, and I'm going to be very, very honest with you. This knowledge is not free. This knowledge comes with a lot of scars, a lot of hurt. This knowledge comes with, but somehow, and from the things I've shared with you, I've had to continue to press. Does it make me perfect? Absolutely not. Does it mean that I don't have challenges now? No, it does not mean I don't have challenges now, but I deal with those challenges different from what a son may have dealt with, from differently from how I may have dealt with them many, many years ago. So that is the difference between a son and a father. It is a level of maturity. Sons who are effeminate, who have been emasculated by their mothers, they show up by being very argumentative a lot of times with their spouses, not being able to appreciate who they are, because as I mentioned earlier, it's about identity. They show up in a way where they will find themselves competing with other men. Okay, that's huge for us as men. A lot of times, when a man is still a son, he can find himself still competing with other men. And I know competition, don't get me wrong, competition is absolutely normal. But for the son who has not healed, he competes in a way where he gets beside himself when things don't go right. He is, again, just at a very immature state, still doing childish things. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, but when I became an adult, I put away childish things. And I think even with that scripture, it really kind of solidifies what I mean by the son and the father. It's about a level of maturity and different experiences, learning from those experiences, because many of us have had experiences for sure. But it is, in fact, learning, getting the lesson that comes from those experiences. I'm going to read one more comment, and I'm going to share just a quick story with you. Okay, and he says here on Facebook, so I'm looking at my other monitor, so if you see me looking away, and he says here on LinkedIn, our grandmothers, he says our grandmothers wreck our granddads and our dads emotionally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, same concept as you just mentioned earlier. The mothers do it to the sons, and if the mothers are doing it to the sons, rest assured the grandmothers have done it to the grandfathers. And again, that is that cycle. And at some point, the grandfathers have done it to their sons, and so on and so on. And he goes on to say, he goes on to say, then our mothers do their best to ruin us with their best intentions. Then we watch our wives destroy our sons before our eyes. Absolutely. Yeah. That's you're brave for making that comment, man. That's well said, man. Well said. It is a vicious cycle. Unfortunately, it is a vicious cycle. And at some point, we have to be prepared to at some point we have to be prepared to stop that cycle. And I think it is, in fact, a man's responsibility to stop that cycle. Oftentimes, I like to say that we as men, we represent the thermostat in our houses, or in our communities, or our respective houses, I should say. We represent the thermostat. And when we're not together, in a sense of when we're not in our respective places, we can't show up and being able to monitor the temperature, so to speak, because rest assured, our spouses, our wives, our significant others, being women, and just how women operate. Sometimes they're coming in the house, they're having a bad day, and perhaps they're looking at things from a certain perspective, and again, a host of different things. We as men have to be able to be prepared to monitor that situation. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Brother Wayne, what's going on, man? Thank you for joining me over on Facebook. Yeah, we as men, we have to be prepared to monitor that situation, and bring that situation where it is where we can control it. Because when it gets out of hand, and as I mentioned earlier, when you're dealing with a son, a man who has not healed, he does not know how to regulate that situation, because he himself, if he's not balanced in his emotions, has a level of emotional intelligence, he's going off the wire just the same in the way as the woman is, his wife or his significant other is, and it can absolutely be a disaster. And just a quick story here as we wrap it up here, guys. I know I've been on for a little bit here, but I'm going to share a quick story with you. Years ago, I had taken flying lessons, and I was in the airline industry for many years, and I had taken flight lessons. And this particular day, my flight instructor. Sorry, take a drink of water here. Excuse me. This particular day, my flight instructor, she was going to be out. I think, yeah, she was pregnant, if I can remember. She was pregnant, and so she had a doctor's appointment. And so she had instructed me that she was not going to be there, and then I was going to connect with the chief pilot. And so I proceeded the following day, aware that she wasn't there, she wasn't going to be there. And then at some point, I connected with the chief pilot, and so the chief pilot says that I'm going to be flying with. She says, "Well, Curtis, you may be flying with me," and I was like, "Great." And I was excited about it. And I was just like, wanted to kind of show someone else my stuff, what I've learned working with my flight instructor. And then so next thing you know, I find out that there's been a change of plans. Now I was flying with this other pilot, flight instructor, and this particular flight instructor, he had was a guy that I had seen around the airport there, a small airport out of Indiana. And so I was like, I've been seeing him around, but this person here, again, I don't even know his name. I can't even remember his name, but I do remember that when I was flying with my flight instructor, I clearly remember seeing this guy. And I remember saying to myself, "Wow, that guy he looks completely intimidating." I was intimidated by that guy. He was tall white guy, and just looked like he knew his stuff. And here I was, just a beginning pilot, and only to find out, because I inquired about him. I just so who's this guy? And so only to find out this guy was a former Air Force pilot. And he had over 21,000 hours, flight hours. And here I was just getting started. And so lo and behold, this day that Penny was my instructor, this day that she's not flying, she's got a doctor's appointment, I find out I'm flying with this guy. And I'm sharing this story because I can remember growing out of this thing that I needed to grow out of, the healing that I needed to take as a man, or receive it as a man. I can remember I was comfortable working with women. I had a difficult time working with men because it was mainly my mother growing up. My stepfather was there, but he wasn't there. But nevertheless, great provider. But my mother was more the vocal person. And so lo and behold, on this day, I was flying with this tall white guy who I was completely intimidated by. We do my checks here, trying to wrap the story up here. I do my checks here on the aircraft. I finally take off after doing my checks, and he's got a newspaper. And so I'm looking over at him. I'm like, well, why is he not paying attention to me? And he's guy's absolutely got tons of experience. And so I'm like, why isn't this guy paying attention to me? He's just casually reading his paper, and then I find myself getting a little frustrated. He says, "Don't worry about me. Just fly the plane." That's what he says to me. And I'm looking at him as I'm sharing this story with you. This just kind of came to me. I was looking at him because what happens when us men who have not been healed, we can find ourselves looking for validation. So much like when I was flying with my female instructor, I should say, I would usually look at her just for validation if I was doing it right. And for him, he was like, validation, that didn't mean anything to him. And so for me, it was uncomfortable sitting in that because I didn't have anywhere to go with those feelings. So here I am getting to altitude. I think altitude was 3,800 feet or something like that. I'm flying a small Cessna aircraft. We're trimming the aircraft. The trim on the aircraft is a small dial, at least on the Cessna 172 I was flying. The trim on the aircraft is a little dial that's in the center of the aircraft, and you push it up, roll it back for nose up on the aircraft, roll it forward for nose down. And so I get to my altitude at 3,800 feet, and I begin to trim the aircraft to kind of level the aircraft off. And he says, "Just fly the aircraft." This is what he says to me. And up to this point, flying the aircraft, or previously flying with my flight instructor Penny, who was a female, I had not the best landings. I'll be honest with you. I did not have the greatest of landings. And anyone who's ever flown or pilot, that's the key, is to have a good landing. So up to that point, I had never had a good landing. And so he's on me. I'm feeling the anxiety that comes with being out of my comfort zone, because mostly up to this point, I had dealt with women all my life, my mother, and just didn't have a whole lot of conversations outside of. Thank you, Henry, for the comment. Didn't have a whole lot of conversation and dialogue with men outside of my mother, at least, again, just the way it was. And here I was now in a situation that's brought me to placed me in a place dealing with anxiety now, because typically I was not accustomed to dealing with men one-on-one, just having those conversations with men. And so the instructor, he's saying, "Fly the plane, Curtis. Just put your hand on the yoke. Just fly the plane. I don't want you to use the trim. Just leave it alone." So now we're doing a stall. We're doing what they call stalls, and that means that I'm going to pull the aircraft up. He is now trimming the aircraft. He's rolling the little dial that I just shared with you, the information. He's rolling that dial, the trim level, backwards. And when he's rolling it backwards, the nose of the aircraft is trimming up. Now, the aircraft is about to stall now. Now, I've got to push the nose down, because when the aircraft stalls, you hear you hear a horn that lets you know that the airflow has been disrupted, has been interrupted, that's flowing across the wing in a normal pattern. And so now the airflow has been disrupted. The horn on the aircraft has gone off to let me know that I'm in a stall pattern. I've got to push the aircraft down to level it off. He did not want me to use the trim, which normally I would use the trim to level the aircraft back off. I'm sweating and just going through all kinds of different things to fly this aircraft. I'm about to land this story here. Now, after all I had done with this guy, like I said, I completely intimidated with this guy. When I landed that aircraft, that was the best landing I had ever done. So I share that story with you is to say that, kind of echoing what Annie said over on LinkedIn, men have a way of pulling out some things that mothers can't. And that's just the way it is. Men have a way of challenging us as sons that we may become fathers as well. And I remember after I landed that aircraft, the tears came down my face because I wasn't expecting that lesson. I grew up in a household where predominantly women, my mother, my sisters, a lot going on a lot of times. And at some point, as I shared with you earlier, even my son's mother, she would go on to say to me, oh, what are you going to do? Call your mother? That started this whole thing to the place where I'm at right now as a father, no longer in a place as a son, but as a father. And as painful sometimes as the truth or different things that people say to us, sometimes we can take them personally, and rightfully so. They hurt sometimes. But in fact, it was a promotion that I needed. And perhaps the pain that us men, some of you men who may be listening now or perhaps will listen to the replay, perhaps this is the story that you needed. Perhaps the story that you need to tell yourself is that you're hurting, that there's some undealt with traumas and pains that are still there. And that because of those things, it makes it difficult for you to have a prosperous relationship with your wife, with your kids. It can make it difficult for us as men to submit to understanding, to submit to the truth. Anything outside of what we are telling ourselves, anything outside of that program that we're replaying in our minds, those internal conversations. So it can make it difficult to hear anything outside of those conversations. Because when we hear something outside of those conversations, we can feel challenged. But the time and the hour is now to be challenged, to get uncomfortable, much like I was uncomfortable flying that airplane with that man who I don't know, can't even remember his name. But I believe he was assigned me. He was assigned to me that day. And it was a lesson that I chose to respond to. It was a lesson that I chose to consume 100% of the lesson. Because if I had not, perhaps I could still be in a place as a son. I want to read a comment here over on LinkedIn. Henry says, this is fascinating review of many ways that mothers injure their sons and vice versa. Absolutely. Vice versa. Fathers injure their sons as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially with their daughters, fathers and their daughters. Absolutely. What role do mothers play in promoting and promoting the record levels. The mistrust that we are, hold on, guys, I'm reading a comment over on LinkedIn. So, okay, Henry says, what role do mothers play in promoting record levels of mistrust that we are witnessing in 2025? I believe it's 2025. Yeah, Henry, I kind of went over those things too. I don't know when you joined, but yeah, there's a major role that the mothers have played. Again and again, it is not to say that that it was done intentionally, but I think that as the old saying is, hurt people, and it does not matter who they are, even if it's their kids. And that is just a way of life. And so emotionally, us as men, we can be damaged goods, and not being able to deal with having conversations with our spouses, not being able to have conversations with other men. We can find ourselves competing with other men. And matter of fact, we can find ourselves competing with our wives as well when we have not healed. When the sons have not healed and become fathers, they can find themselves competing not only with not only with other men, but competing with their wives. Because in their own minds now, they have something to prove because they were emasculated by their mothers. You can say, well, Curtis, the mother and the wife are different. Yes, they are different, but she's still a woman. She's still a woman. So the sons who have been emasculated, who can find themselves working and operating in this an effeminate spirit, if you will, they can find themselves competing with their wives, significant others, girlfriends, competing with people in life, trying to prove something. So it is. Hopefully that answers your question, Henry. So thank you for that great question. Yeah, it is. It is a list of different things. This is definitely not an exhaustive list in regards to the emotional dealings or areas that are insufficient for that young man, for that son. And I mentioned earlier, the son does not necessarily mean that he's 17 years old or 18 years old, 3 years old. The son can be 50 years old. The son can be 60 years old. Still a son, having not matured, come to a level of maturity. And so when the son becomes a father, he deals absolutely different from how the son deals with things. And he says over here on LinkedIn, he says, our sons need influence on both. Our sons need the influence of both mothers and fathers. Fathers can keep being silenced and forced to submit to mothers and wives. Yes, absolutely. Well, that's powerful in itself because, as I said, I'm going to wrap it up here, but that's powerful in itself, because what happens, man, is that until we as sons, those of us, our sons, begin to take our rightful place, even to cry out as Jabez cried out and said, Lord, I need help. Help me figure this thing out. Until we as men, the sons, get to that place and cry out, man, we will forever remain sons and feel the hand of our wives as a mother to a child rather than a mother, rather than a wife to her husband. So until the father first now, the husband, yes, important, but the father, being the father, taking the lead in his household, leading in a way of not having his wife submit and know she has to come. No, that's not what I'm talking about. As you said, Annie, so nicely, the mother and the father are both an influence. They're both an influence. But there's something that a father has to bring to his household that a mother cannot. And I know the world says otherwise. Who cares what they say? Who cares what they say? The word of God is either true or not. And as men, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, husband, love your wives as Christ loved the church. That's huge, man. That's huge. That's not a small job, man. Hey, Margaret, thank you for joining. That's not a small job. Because the scriptures don't even call for the woman to love their husbands. It says to respect your husbands. And for us as men, respect is like love. They're one and the same for us men. So women are to respect their husbands. But in line with what we've been talking about, if the wife, the mother who is not in a place where she respects her husband, and this is happening over and over, it is to imply that there's a space that's something that she's dealing with her own father. It doesn't mean that the husband has done. Maybe the husband has. Maybe the husband has done something wrong. But when a husband has his wife disrespecting him over and over, there's healing that needs to be done. She perhaps has had an issue with her father. And rest assured, those behaviors will carry out to the children. So as sons, we need this confirmation. Yeah, Margaret says over on LinkedIn, it is a heavy responsibility. Absolutely, it's a heavy responsibility. Because to be honest, you don't always feel like it. I don't always feel like it. But I've got to muster it up. Because, as I stated earlier, I'm the thermostat in my household. I can't speak for any other men. But I'm the thermostat in my household. And if I'm off and my wife is off, it's a mess. It's a mess. And this journey that I've taken in life thus far, this journey that I've taken, I've discovered that it's a lot more than bringing home a paycheck. It's a lot more than just having a job. As men, we have to minister to our wives. We've got to learn how to comfort them with the word of God. And I said in a previous conversation, I can't remember who I was talking to, but I said in a previous conversation is that means that you got to dig deep as men. We've got to dig deep and have these needed conversations with our wives. And that when the wife is loved and taken care of, Margaret says exactly over on LinkedIn, she says exactly, wife must respect the husband, father, daughter, issues carry on, generational. Absolutely. Absolutely. Continued prayers for your unity and other marriages, brother. Absolutely. Thank you, Margaret. Absolutely. Well, yeah, this is the only marriage right here. This is it. This is it. This is it. But great word, Margaret. Absolutely. And and I can only imagine it could be hard for the wives who respect their husbands. It can be difficult, especially if the daughters who eventually become wives, if they have not had the proper example. Thank you. Hey, brother Wayne, what's going on, man? Thank you for joining me over on LinkedIn. Wayne says, Curtis, you hit so many gems tonight. Albeit dysfunction can carry on generationally. Absolutely. Until a decision is taken to interrupt the pattern. Yes, Wayne. That's awesome, man. Good stuff. Recognizing wounds. I'll make sure I get all of that there. He says recognizing wounds and unmet needs is critical. Yes, yes, that's powerful, man. There's a lot to this conversation, guys. Even what Wayne is interjecting here, there's a lot more that could be said because, as he just mentioned here, there can be unmet expectations in our relationships, and that right there is yet a completely another show right there. But a great call there, Wayne. But healing happens. Yeah, he says, but healing happens, be it son or daughter, man or woman, learns to meet the needs of themselves. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. We must absolutely be prepared to meet the needs of for individually as men. We must absolutely be prepared to take care of ourselves and taking care of ourselves. And I'll give you a few tips on how I've taken care of myself. First, I've had to put myself in a place where I had to forgive my mother. I had to forgive my mother, and for us as men, a lot of us may not have forgiven our mothers, and that's the first things first. And I think that if we are trying to build something or trying to heal without forgiving that person, it can be difficult for that thing that you're building to last, to have any kind of longevity, because you'll find yourself having to go back to the very beginning of the thing that you're trying to build, because it can't stand without the emotional fortitude that you will gather from the forgiveness that is being ushered, the forgiveness that is being interjected into your soul, the forgiveness that you are taking hold of, the comfort, the peace that you will acquire, because now you can build on peace. Now you can build on peace, on the groundwork of peace. Okay, so without building on the groundwork or the foundation of peace, it can be very difficult for that building to stand. As the Bible says, this can be equivalent to a man building his house on sand rather than the rock, or rather than a strong foundation. And absolutely. So we must be prepared to deal with the things that we need to deal with as men. One of the things that were very important to me through my journey in healing, and I'm going to just give you the scripture notation here, and that was the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis, verse. Got a lot going on here. The book of Genesis, that is scripture. The book of Genesis, chapter 1, verses 26 through 31. Those scriptures have absolutely changed my life. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Annie says over on LinkedIn, he says healing is the start. Healing is the start of a man or individual man. Healing is the start of a person finding their purpose. Healing. It's powerful, guys. So it runs in line with that forgiveness. So as I just mentioned, the biggest tip that I can give you, and here's the thing, unless we as men, unless we get that identity right, it's not even looking at another man. Because as men, we all have we've all made mistakes. We've all have those issues or challenges that we might be dealing with. We've all fallen on some level. And so for me personally, I'm not here trying to convert anyone. I promise you I'm not. But for me personally, I found my faith in God, and knowing that if I can connect with the right image, because previously, as I was sharing with you my stories, my different stories I was sharing with you, the connection that I had was the connection that my mother had. That was her connection, how she dealt with men, or the pain that she had in dealing with men. And conversely, it spilled over into how she dealt with me. Again, maybe not to the degree in how she dealt with my father, my stepfather, but the spillage over the things that spilled over into that space were the things that I had to deal with, that I had to heal from. So until a man comes to a place of who his identity is, because essentially when men are dealing with the pain of their mothers, they're dealing with a reflection that the mother is trying to project on her sons. That is her image, but it doesn't have to be yours. That's how she sees it. That's how she has dealt with her pain, unfortunately. But it does not have to be your end. So as we wrap it up here, I want to say thank you to Annie. Thank you for Wayne for being a part of the conversation. And I want to read this last comment by Margaret. Hey, thank you, Margaret. Also, she says, also husband and wives must put each other before the children. Yes, absolutely. That's a huge piece right there, Margaret. Absolutely. She says they must be the glue. The children must follow and not undermine the parents or put them against one another. Parents must be aligned as one. Absolutely. That is powerful. That's good talk right there, Margaret, over on LinkedIn. Yeah, I've dealt with that. Matter of fact, in the marriage to my son's mother, that's what I dealt with. Absolutely. And as a man dealing with that, it was just like, man, whew, it was tough. It was tough. And so, and I would even just suffice it to say is that I have had to do a lot of healing and for my own self. And this healing is not free, folks. This healing is not free. It's not free. It's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you something. And it's going to cost you everything. It really is. And it doesn't mean that I'm perfect. Doesn't mean that I've completed the cycle or no, it's the healing just goes on because sometimes this stuff comes up. You know, that old person tries to show up sometimes. And I have to be prepared to shut them down because that's not me. Yeah, you're welcome, Annie. Thank you, sir, for being here. Thank you for your engagement. Absolutely. Thank you for the engagement. Thank you all for the engagement. Annie, over on LinkedIn, Margaret on LinkedIn, thank you for your engagement. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Who else? We've got quite a few people. Thank you, Henry, for your engagement, your questions. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Jay, for your engagement as well. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Tracy. And yeah, great conversation. Thank you guys for making this a great conversation. Your questions and just your engagement alone helps to kind of trigger thoughts for me and kind of get the conversation going here. So also thank you, Wayne, you were on Facebook. Thank you, Janice over on Facebook. Thank you, Apostle Fuller, who is my apostle at the church that we attend, the gathering. So thank you, Apostle, for being a part of this conversation. And I think Steve Fuller, he joined earlier. Thank you, Steve, for being a part of the conversation. And guys, it has absolutely been a pleasure. And hopefully you will join me next week on another great conversation. Have not decided on what it's going to be about just yet. Did not mean to keep you this long, but again, thank you for being a part of this conversation. We're almost into 2 hours on this conversation here. So I want to say good night to all. We'll be back here next week on same time at 7 o'clock on Thursday with another broadcast. That is That Man's Show. Once more, my name is Curtis Brooks. I am a men's life coach. And before I leave, I want to put this up here, and I neglected to put this on the screen here. For you who have been listening in and who are a part of the conversation, reach out to me. The link is on the screen. That's bit.ly/free 30-minute coaching. Hopefully you can see it. It's not doesn't appear to be showing up on LinkedIn for some reason. I don't see it there. But nevertheless, there's a link on the screen here. That's bit.ly. Wow, that was a long delay. That's bit.ly/free 30-minute coaching. You can connect with me if you are a man who is desiring to make the change in your life and take the lead in your household. And that does not mean that you are subjecting your wife or your household to the pain that you're dealing with, but you're actually you're going to become an overcomer. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about overcoming the challenges that you have been so long facing and so long dealing with. Connect with me. The link is on the screen there. So guys, for now, ladies and gentlemen, for now, we're going to say ciao for now. We're going to say goodbye. Again, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you part of this conversation. And we will see you next week, Thursday at 7 o'clock p.m. That is That Man Show. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.